Welcome, everyone, to On the Homefront with Jeff Dudan. Thanks for tuning in. Just a quick reminder before we get rolling, if you enjoy the podcast, take a second, drop down to that comment or review section and leave us some feedback. And whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or Spotify, we want to hear from you. And please like and subscribe. Today on the Homefront, we have a very special guest. We are here with Eric Yaverbaum. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan.
Eric is, for those of you who don't know, 7 times author, over 1 million books sold in his Secrets of Successful CEOs. Also wrote a book with his daughter most recently, but has had a long career in PR, CNN, all of the major networks, and really has really excited to hear some stories about some of the great PR wins and losses that you've been a part of over this time. But Eric, to get started, can you share a little bit about who you are and maybe a little bit about where you're from?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you a funny story, and then I'll tell you about who I am.
All right.
Because as we were chatting before, we went on air here. When I was a kid, my first mentor, and I'm a big believer in mentors. Everybody should, in your careers, get mentors, get people that you can learn from. My very first mentor was Henry Kissinger. And
Okay.
Kissinger told me that when he used to go before the White House press corps, he would walk out. And this is, during Watergate, you got presses going after a sitting president. This is in the early 70s. I mean, it's unheard of. The press did not go after a sitting president. Kissinger would go out before the White House press corps and say, does anybody have any questions for the answers I'm already giving? So when you asked, is there anything we want to talk about? The questions don't matter. I'm giving the same answers anyway. It won't make a difference. But I've literally taught that to Fortune 500 CEOs for 40 years now, how to conduct themselves in interviews so that they can get out messages that they want to get out. And I'm not so proud of the fact that I think that's what modern day politics is. We never seem to get answers to the questions that we're actually asking. But that is the subtle art of public relations, is how do you use a tool of getting media exposure to move a needle, to make you money, to enhance your brand, to help your reputation. And, for 40 plus years, and you mentioned some of the shows, I've been on national television for my whole career. I'm written about in newspapers and magazines. I practice what I preach. As far as my career goes, when I was a kid, I ran a traditional PR agency for about 20 years, sold it to Wall Street, thought, oh my gosh, all my dreams have come true. I have a lot of money. I just sold my company to Wall Street. I would say it was the most miserable year and a half of my life. A big life lesson there. Be careful what you wish for. It's not about money. It's not what it's about. You got to love what you do. You love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. First 20 years, I worked my backside off to sell my place, or I would say in retrospect, sell my soul to Wall Street. I stayed there for about 15 months. I walked in the middle of a 3-year earnout. I just couldn't do it. And I worked on the transition team between the Bush and the Obama administration, which was supposed to be brief, and I ended up staying around the first year of Obama's presidency in the White House while I was starting the agency that I run now. The agency that I run now is very, very different than a traditional PR agency. I grew up both inside my industry and outside. My books didn't hurt. You mentioned Leadership Secrets. That book is now actually sold 3 million copies if you include digital. And I got a reputation inside the C-suite, which, here when I was a kid, all I ever wanted to do was be in a boardroom. All I ever wanted to do was let me sit in the room with the CEO who makes the decisions. But I was just, I was a PR guy. We all get our hair gel in New York in the same place. We all talk a really good game. How do you do that? How do you get in the room with the chairman? That was always my objective, to get in the room with the decision maker. And that's what I do now. I do it for startups, which I take great pride in, startups that turn into billion-dollar businesses. I do it in philanthropy. I do it in sports. I'm in the room with the decision makers, and I did that on purpose. That's the thing about having goals and objectives and an actual plan to do it. Is I'm in the room with the decision maker because I feel like I can convince decision makers if I am in the same room with them. Intentionality is a superpower, and if you have a goal and you can accomplish that goal on purpose, you'll be amazed at what can happen. So, in my career, I've run agencies now for 40 years. This is the one that I run now is my second. I've had this one for 17 years. And, during the entire course of my career, I am working on my 8th book right now. And, I did a brief stint at the White House. So I've done a few things.
You talk about being in the boardroom. PR is oftentimes not in the initial cocktail for entrepreneurs. They're getting their business started. They're thinking about direct response marketing. PR is defensive in a crisis, but are you saying that it needs to be offensive? From day one?
Don't miss the offensive part. It's ironic because when I started my career, we were involved with a lot of infomercial companies. And these infomercial companies, direct response companies, we were doing their PR. And I would watch the art of direct response. They go on television, they buy, they make ads, they buy time, they literally measure how many widgets do they sell from their ad, what time works better, which does the 30, 60 or 90-second spot work better? Is long form, an hour or a half hour, is that better? You can literally measure it. And I always thought to myself, we don't do that in PR. There's no measurement. My clients want me to get them pressed. They want to be in newspapers and magazines. They want to be on television and radio shows, but we don't measure. To me, the art of PR is all about cash registers. And one of the things that I found out when I was a kid was, my first 20 years, I represented all the big bad brands. We represented Sony, we represented Progressive Insurance, Kia Home Furnishings, H&M. I mean, I can go on and on. With all of those, and by the way, loved them all. Learned from all of them. What I learned was companies, and by the way, this includes startups because I was involved with a lot of startups at the time too, including like one in particular that got bought by Google. They weren't like insignificant. That agencies like mine got hired and were expected to get press. That's the bare minimum. That's what we're paid to do. In reality, if a company's not fiscally healthy, first thing they cut is PR.
That's right.
It's the first thing that gets cut. So I became very interested in, and one of the reasons I wanted to be in the chairman's office, one of the reasons I wanted to be on, sit on boards is I became very interested in what's the relationship between positive media exposure and the cash register. And how do I build a bridge from media exposure over the cash register? Because I do know that if I get my clients a lot of press and they monetize that press, they'll keep me forever. And, I would say my average client is around for about 15 years, give or take. I have clients on my raw. I have 2 clients, they've been with me for 40 years. They don't, obviously, I feel like family with them now, but they keep, at least in the beginning, because I know how to make people money from the art of public relations. When I was a kid, what I was known for was crisis, as you mentioned. I got paid really well to handle crises and put out fires, and I put out a lot of fires that you never read about because I did my job. But I don't do that anymore. I don't put out. I'm not interested in putting out fires. I'm entrepreneurial. I always have been. It's what I discovered when I sold my soul to Wall Street. Is what I like rubbing 2 sticks together and making forest fires. And I like using the art that I practice, the discipline of PR, to rub those 2 sticks together and make businesses billion-dollar companies, which I have a long storied history of. And so, yes, PR should be, and by the way, PR, of all the things that you're going to do in marketing, is the least expensive. Not if you need to hire agencies like mine, but you can actually do it yourself. And if you can get press exposure that generates interest that translates over to a cash register, it's magical what it could do. And, I've pontificated this very theory for over 40 years. And when I was a kid in the 80s, I would tell this to everybody, and everybody would say, big shot, what'd you ever do? And nothing. Who do you know? Nobody. I still don't believe you need to know anybody to get on their shows. So my partner and I, in my first agency, when we were small, we were working out of our living room. That's how we started. We said, what can we do to demonstrate? It's one thing, statement is one thing, demonstration is a whole other thing. What can we do to demonstrate literally our philosophies? How do we use media exposure to generate interest in our little, agency that's 5 people working out of the living room in my house in my brownstone in Capitol Hill in DC? How do we generate interest in what we do? How do we use media exposure to do that? So we looked at the landscape of the world, which is ever so interesting, not always in a positive way. And we said, what story can we predict with a reasonable degree of certainty is going to have a long shelf life? And what story could we look at and say, we kind of know how it's going to be, the coverage is going to play itself out. In 1985, there was a pending Major League Baseball strike. And, in the good old days, the way labor disputes got covered in professional sports was rich players, wealthier owners, and the fans. So the story is what the players want, what the owners want, and then they find some guy in the street who's going to complain about, legitimately so, why I can't take my family to a baseball game. I can't buy, if I'm going to get a hot dog and a soda and, French fries for my whole family and buy, 4 tickets, like that's almost out of my price range. And I got to hear about players who are wealthy and owners who are wealthier argue about money.
Right.
I'm just trying to go to a game a year and get hot dogs for my kids. It's the same. It was always the same. So in '85, we formed the National Citizens Action Group to protest the pending Major League Baseball strike. And the premise of the organization was, everybody had, labor unions, everybody has do what you want. Everybody's got their right. But we were forming a National Citizens Action Group for the fans, so that the fans would have a voice. And our message was, it's okay, you want to strike, go ahead. For every game you strike, we're going to strike. And we asked people to send us a letter. That's it. That's all the fans had to do, just send us a letter. And, we got tens of thousands of letters. We used to dump them on Peter Uberoff's doorstep. He was the commissioner at the time, daily. And CNN would come into my living room on Capitol Hill just to see how many bags of mail we got every day. And, when the strike started, we called Uberoff's office and they were like, cute kids. Nobody was taking our call. When we started dropping off bags of mail on their doorstep, the people who were going to honor our boycott, they started to take us a little bit more seriously. When that strike started in '85, they invited my partner and I into the negotiations. We sat, I'm 24 years old, I'm sitting in Major League Baseball's negotiations to end a labor dispute.
That is absolutely fantastic.
All I know is I don't want to, after day one of those negotiations, we go out to a river of press who wants to hear what's the fans' opinion, the fans that were in the room. What's your opinion of what was discussed?
You were the proxy. You were the proxy for the fans, basically. Okay, yes. You were representing the broader fan base.
Yes,
got it.
So, the coverage that we got was extraordinary. And in the good old days, and some of these names your viewers may or may not know, but I was on. I was on everything. Ted Koppel asked me the same question that Larry King asked me. It was the same way that Time magazine covered what we did. Everybody said, why? Why are you doing this? And my answer was, this is what I do for a living. I get my clients on television, radio, talk shows. I get my clients in newspapers and magazines. I'm just using the same avenues as I would to promote any of my clients to promote this cause that I feel so strongly about. When when the strike started, I had 3 clients. When the strike ended, I had 11. From all the exposure that we generated. That was exposure where I got to do something good. It drove people over to my cash register, which was a service business, and I was on the map as a 24-year-old. I was able to use the art of public relations and press exposure to make my business better. And that, to me, is what PR should be all about. Not always defending yourself, not always correcting yourself, not always dealing with the press when you don't want to be in the the spotlight because you said something wrong, which is the way I think most people look at PR. If you're a startup, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're looking to raise money, if you're a small business, it's the great equalizer. The kind of press that I got with 5 people working out of my living room on Capitol Hill in DC rivaled what any Fortune 500 was getting in any given day. Why? Why is that? Why could I get that kind of exposure, which is the same kind of exposure that my clients ended up paying for me to get for them? Because you can. And you can use, that exposure to build your business.
Have your fundamentals changed with the rise of social media and the ability to more quickly understand the reach and the impact of the campaigns that you launch?
As my kids would say, hell yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I started in this business, I'm a kid, and Cronkite was just going off the air at the time. And at the end of CBS Evening News, when he ended the news, he would say, "And that's the way it is," and it was, and it was God sent. That's not the case anymore. And if just to give a crisis example, if we had a crisis in the 80s, well, I'll give you one I do for a multinational without naming names or talking about the crisis, but I get a phone call on a Friday. Oh boy, you're not going to believe what happened over here in this part of the world today. By Monday, it's going to hit the U.S. Today, I have a second. And I don't have a weekend to prepare. I have 1 second, which
That's right.
really means, which I learned from Elizabeth Dole, who said to me, the worst time to prepare is while the tide is rising. You need to, if you don't have a crisis plan in place right now, you're already, you can lose your entire business, in an internet second. Warp speed, that's how fast information travels. And that's how fast misinformation travels. And that entire landscape is different. And here's the thing about that is that everybody who, I call it information dissemination. Now it's still, I'm still called a PR guy. We're still a PR agency. It's surround sound information dissemination. How do you get your news? How do you make your decisions? And, your unique algorithm is telling you what you already want to hear anyway on any social medium. So don't be expecting to hear 2 sides of the story. You literally, when you come to a fork in the road, as Yogi Berra once famously remarked, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Digitally, when you come to a fork in the road, you're being pulled in the direction you're already inclined to go anyway. It's that easy to keep going down that road without evaluating facts in the way that you might have, 10 years ago. You don't do that anymore. So, your Facebook algorithm, your Google, algorithm, it's pulling you in the direction you're predisposed to going. And we're all doing that, which is, rears its ugly head in politics, just as one example. There's no middle anymore. There's no intellectual friction. Used to be a great thing. You get 2 smart people in a room who don't agree. The intellectual friction gets you a better decision. There's none of that anymore. Everybody goes one of 2 ways.
Yeah, the same situation, the same facts, a political issue, and you're going to get pulled into your echo chamber deeper because they're going to spin it in the way. And sometimes I like to watch when I'm traveling, I like to watch like the BBC network to see what their view is of the things that are happening in the United States, or even Australian news. By the way, Australia is absolutely fascinated with the news cycle in American politics.
Yep.
Because, we catch a cold and, we get sick, the whole world catches a cold, and they know in some cases more about our politics than our citizens do here. But it's are you still active in politics, or do you work in that arena anymore?
I couldn't run far enough away from politics.
I was going to say, because there's plenty to
if
do
I
there,
tried,
but it's,
I mean, after I left the White House, I was a political pundit for almost a decade. I was the only person, at least that I know of, I've yet to hear anybody say, no, you weren't, there was this other person. I did 3 hours a week for Fox, and I did 2 hours a week for MSNBC. I did both. I mean, talk about two polarizing networks.
right.
I did them both in the same week, every week for almost a decade. Spun through two, presidential election cycles. Me personally I was not beloved at Fox. Semi worshipped at MSNBC. Only because, again, telling people what they want to hear. What I found interesting for myself about both networks was it was always a debate with me. It didn't matter which one I was on, which network I was on. Again, I'm dating myself a little bit because that's not the case anymore.
Right.
So I could go on to a network where I wasn't popular with the viewers, which was very clear if I walked out the front door. But I had the opportunity to have those debates, on air. And one of the things I found fascinating about, and this is all about information. I debated that the healthcare bill ad nauseum for, I don't know, a year and a half. And, I was debating it on national television for months and months and months and months. And I said to myself, I never actually even read that bill. I wonder, everybody that I'm debating with, because we're all, arguing about the virtues of it or how terrible it is, but none of us read it because nobody ever reads bills. So I decided to read it. And I used to take it was 1,100 pages. I used to take it on air with me on both networks. And it was all marked up almost like a textbook was. I have my little sticky notes sticking out the side so I could flip to a page and say, well, this isn't what it says on page, 921. That's what we do here. We debate misinformation. And we were doing that then too. I mean, I started an organization back in that period of time called, readthebill.org, where I tried to get Congress people and senators to read the bill, commit to reading the actual bill that they were voting on. And, again, hundreds of thousands of and people, because we're all voting based on these, what our perception is of that. Hundreds of thousands of voters signed the pledge. Zero Congress people or senators did.
Well, they don't have time. You can't possibly read 1,100 pages.
Well, you can't read it when you're getting it at 2:00 in the morning before a vote, and that's the way that we're set up.
Right.
Something's wrong with that.
100%. 100%. I've heard people say there's no such thing as bad PR. Obviously, when you look at some of the massive mistakes that people have made that maybe have cost them $1 billion lately around shoes and things like that. But oftentimes you see people get in the news over something negative, and then a year later, they've got their own talk show. How?
Yeah, well, I mean, if getting your own talk show is your goal, I mean, personally.
Well, true. Yeah, that's punishment in and of itself. But, it's at some point, once you have reach and people know who you are, and I mean, we're just creatures of habit. I mean, we're interested to see what's going on with Britney Spears right now. I mean, Britney Spears has been one PR matter after another for the last 15 or 20 years. But yet, people who continue to follow and, like what she's doing and all that kind of stuff. What kind of opportunities are there for companies to take some chances, to, push the envelope a little bit, but yet not put, who they are and their customer base at risk?
That's up to each individual company and each individual person. I mean, I would say I'm kind of out there on my opinions. My opinion is they are what I think. I'd rather just say what I think
Right.
than say what I'm supposed to say. I
Yeah.
mean, I can be politically correct all day long, but that's not me.
That's no fun.
My agency, we are who we are. I'm really proud of that particular factoid. And with emphasis on factoid, I don't ask anybody to be anything but what they are. I would much rather know who you are in real life
Mm.
than who you pretend to be in front of the camera, all the time. And I think corporate America gets in trouble a lot for that because they're trying to sell stuff. So they're going to lose half their customers on any given day based on what they say. What are your values? What do you actually stand for? And the people who don't want to buy your product because of that, to me, I say fine. Don't. That's okay. Let people buy your products for who you are, transparently and genuinely. Um, I, th- I just think that's so much better. You're going to get yourself in trouble. I can say right or I can say left in this interview. By the way, it won't matter what I say, ever. Somebody's going to disagree. And in my case, sometimes a lot of people. And for people, my entire career, I've been dealing with that. I mean, if I say the wrong thing on national television, you know, my social media gets flooded with
Yeah.
really awful things. In the old days, I would watch what people would say about me. But it didn't make it to air. I'd see the stuff coming in, what the viewers were saying, but it didn't make the air. And I can feel it some days. And I live in New York City. I go out at night. I can feel it. Somebody sees me on television one day. They got a definite opinion one way or the other. I can't be anything but myself. That's just who I'm going to be. And I look. I told you 10 minutes ago, I couldn't get far enough from politics if I tried. After spending most of my career involved in politics,
Yeah.
in some way, shape, or form, I don't. It's toxic. I don't want to be involved. Personally, I'd rather do stuff that makes the world a better place. Right now, at this particular stage in my career, where I've never had so much fun in my life. I'm talking about life, and I'm talking about my, professionally. The first 50 years are the hardest. After that, man, if you learn some stuff, if you let life teach you, you'll learn great stuff every day. And it's not always because counting money is easy. Losing it's painful. What do you learn from the challenging situations? I believe there's silver linings in every one of them. You tell me what was the worst day of your life, I will tell you why it was the best. That's the day that changed you. Everything's a matter of perception, and your entire life, yours and anybody who's listening to this, your whole damn life is in between your ears. It's how you think.
Yeah.
Whatever you are thinking is literally how you are living. That's your life. So if I say my life's great, and believe it in my own head, guess what? Things are great. I mean, it's everything's a matter of perception, and I'm in
It,
that. I am in that business for a living. And people always say, I was just talking about it on a show earlier today. Eric, be an optimist. I mean, I learned how to be optimistic when I was a kid. I literally taught myself how to be optimistic. Learned optimism. The first book that I read that started to frame a different way of looking at things. And is the glass half full? Is the glass half empty? Which one are you? Who cares? Just fill up the glass again. That's actually an option. Nobody throws that into the equation. It's actually possible. It doesn't make a difference if the glass is half empty or half full. You literally have the opportunity and the option any given day. Fill it up again. Start all over.
yeah.
Get up. It's like as a kid. I'm a big believer in team sports. I played basketball as a point guard. I wasn't the best player on the court. I directed the offense. I've been directing the offense my entire career. I was also a boxer, a really lousy one. I got knocked down a lot. I didn't do a lot of knocking down. But one of the things I always did when I got knocked down, I got back up. Everybody would say, yeah, stay down. It's like, I don't think so. I'm going to keep trying. But, all metaphors for life, for your career, personally, professionally, we all get the same 86,400 seconds in a day. You got them, I got them, same ones, equal. What do you want to do with them? I'm going to just take them. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get every one of them. That's all, because I can. I got that choice. So do you. So does everybody listening. What do you want to do with them? Because, we're all going to the same place in the end anyway. All of us. Same again. And the thing about it is, you know what you want to do today? You want to have lunch, or you want to have dinner. You want to sleep in a bed tonight. You want to have, depending on what climate you're in, you want to have an air conditioning or heat. We all want the same stuff. I'm hungry at dinner time. I want to eat. You hungry at dinner time? You want to eat. There's not that. I mean, money pollutes to me.
It does.
It's definitely. I've had a great career. I'm not going to apologize for being successful ever. I never have. And I made this all on my own. I did this all on purpose. And yes, I can pay my bills, so I don't have to worry about that part. But it's the stuff that's priceless. Go ahead and fall in love. Or if you're really wealthy, just buy that, because you can't. Get sick, and you'll realize what matters. The day that you get sick, everything changes in your life. All you want is good health. The day you lose somebody, all you want is them back. Everything that matters is not for sale.
Yeah. A little trick that I've recently adopted when I find myself not wanting to do something, or, something that I just, not interested in doing, or is upsetting me, I just changed the meaning of it. I was in New York this weekend. My daughter lives on the Upper East Side, and she's teaching. She used to go to school at NYU, and she's teaching yoga. And I did yoga once before, and I almost had a stroke. It was tough for me. I'm not a yoga guy. But, she wanted us to go. There was nobody else signed up for her class. And, and I just said, you know what? I want to do this because she wants to show me how she does this particular aspect of her life. And dude, I went and had the best class with the best attitude. And it was so simple to do. We just get out of our own way and again, change the view, sit in awareness for a minute. What's the universe trying to teach you? And if you take it, be open to that, because at the end of the day, like you said, man, it all comes to a screeching, abrupt halt for every single one of us one day. And then you're going to look back and say, man, I wasted a lot of time being petty.
Yeah, that's why I said the first 50 years are the hardest. I learned all this in the first 50 years.
Yeah, right.
I've been having the greatest life ever since. The trappings have changed. Things are different. I learned what was priceless and what wasn't priceless. But, I also, everybody, how many obstacles you're going to face in your life? How many obstacles you're going to have just today? Obstacles are actually the path. They're not obstacles. We all have them. Nobody's life is, like Facebook makes it out to be. I am not happy 24/7. But what I am 24/7, every week, I'm getting this moment. You know what I'm doing right now? I'm talking to you. Nothing else. I'm talking to you. It's interesting to me. We have an interesting conversation. It's engaging. I hope something that one of us said is contagious. I hope some smile of a reaction makes somebody else smile. Yeah. I hope somebody else says, gosh, that's an interesting, or learns one thing. I hope that would be really cool. I mean, what a way to live that is. I mean, I'm an exercise, on the cover of my next book, they have fitness fanatic.
Okay.
I exercise every single solitary day. I exercise because it makes me feel good. Yeah. And I hope that I'm not obsessed with the way that I look. I am obsessed with the way that I feel. You know what, endorphins, by the way, they're free too. All you got to do is exercise. You want them? Can't buy them either. Go ahead, get some endorphins tomorrow morning. You can't buy them. You will not believe how it changes your perspective of a day. That's from just exercising, a commitment, to exercise, that I hold myself accountable for, and I use social media for that. And this is a big difference about social media. I use one particular platform, Instagram. On Instagram, I use Instagram to keep myself accountable. I'm not getting used by it. That's the big difference between so many people in social media. We're the product on social media. We're free, by the way. We should be using social media. We should not be being used by it. And everybody's life isn't a vacation. Everybody's life isn't that meal that you're looking at a snapshot of. Everybody's life is not happy all the time. It sure looks that way on social media. And I worry a lot about the youth and kids who are growing up digitally, born digitally. Is how do they look at the world? Go outside and climb a tree. Watch a sunset just once or twice or every day if you want. You should. And be in the moment. Live presently. I pontificate about all this stuff every single place that I go. And it has nothing to do with what I do for a living. I'm very happy. I was with a client the other day, and I said, you know what we should be doing is promoting hope. That's what we should be doing. And the client says, well, why? But, I said, hope doesn't have an agency. If hope could, I want to adopt hope as my client. They don't have to pay me. I'd love to spread a little bit of that. And any brand who does that, people with positive attitudes, it's magnetic. I don't attract an audience by being doom and gloom. I attract an audience because I'm a hopeful guy. And there was a Fred Rogers when he gave congressional testimony in '69. They were trying to raise money for PBS. PBS was like, something that they were literally shooting in the basement, with a camera, and they had a show and they had no money. And Mr. Rogers goes before Congress and he's trying to raise money, and nobody knows who he is. And he basically said that in times of trouble, look for the helpers. If you see the helpers, you'll know there's hope. And that particular congressional testimony ended up raising all of the money that launched PBS. Congress was just awed by what this guy had to say. It's true. And, we all recently went through a pandemic. Forget about all the other things that we go through every single solitary day. We went through a pandemic. All we need, we saw helpers. If we saw helpers, we were hopeful. If we were hopeful, we got through the pandemic. And the irony of it all was everything that you ever worried about, all of it, anything you worried about, it already happened. So now what are you going to worry about? Stop worrying so much. Live life. Enjoy the moment.
You wrote a book with your daughter, and some of the other appearances that you've made. It seems like family was a priority and important to you.
Priceless again.
Absolutely. What?
There's not. For any parent who might be watching, there's nothing you'll ever do. It doesn't go to the build a rocket and go to the moon. There's nothing you will do that's greater than raising children. Nothing.
Yeah, 100%. Are there PR campaigns that you've admired over the years that maybe you wish you were a part of, or somebody did a really great job on something that you could point out?
No, I think that PR campaigns that change the course of history fascinate me. It's the greatest honor of my career. I have like the Kissinger story that I started with. I have so many stories of, I feel a little Forrest Gump-esque. I'm always present for these historical directional shifts. I am to me, I don't care. I don't know what anybody else thinks besides my mom, who thinks the same, but it's so cool to me that I've been inside of history when it's making a left turn or a right turn that I get to be participatory in. It's so cool to me that forget about the books that I've written. and will continue to write. I feel like I have a lot that I could teach people. The books that include me, that talk about me, that reference me, it's so cool. Not that I'm in the books, it's just that my role and involvement in influencing perception and the way that people thought about things. And, look, when I was younger, and, no disrespect to Domino's Pizzas, and one example, they were my first national account. I sold pizza. Selling pizza didn't change the world. Um, uh, uh, Walk a mile in my shoes, which was a campaign that I did for caregivers, got legislation, increased funding for stem cell research, passed. It pissed off George Bush at the time, which I thought, wow, that's so cool. Bush is pissed at me. How cool. And meanwhile, I ended up on the transition team, years later. That, to be involved in that, it doesn't matter what I get paid. That's priceless, to be able to do things like that, to be able to influence the direction, of a large group of people, to change history just a little bit in a different direction. When I was a kid, and I didn't happenstance upon Kissinger. My uncle was very involved with Nixon. Was friends with everybody in the administration. That's how I met Kissinger. He smuggled weapons to Israel for the 6-Day War. There's a book called The Pledge. They wrote all about him because he got caught. He got caught. He had to go before Congress. Congress ended up, letting him off. But I thought, my Uncle Abe, he was involved in the historical, like, how cool? How can I do that? Because I don't have the money to smuggle weapons anywhere. I don't. All I have is the gift of getting people to listen to me. People will listen when I talk. People are it's appealing to people to listen to a perspective. Like when we opened, we helped to open. I don't know whether you had the opportunity to go there while you were in Manhattan, but my agency was involved in something called Summit, which is in One Vanderbilt. One Vanderbilt opened. It's the building connected to Grand Central. It is the most expensive per square foot commercial real estate in Manhattan. And on the 92nd, 93rd, and 94th floor, they have an extraordinary, immersive, I don't know how to describe it other than it's Central Park in the sky. You'll never see Manhattan like you'll see it. A very famous artist named Kenzo Digital designed the entire space. When you talk about being present, you can't help yourself when you're inside of that space. When we were opening that, I looked at it as an inflection point for New York City that was hurting. I mean, if you lived here during the pandemic, there were some strange times, and nobody could wait for the. I mean, in fact, there's traffic again. That there's crowds in restaurants again. That we can all go out to play. That we're not all stuck inside of our, homes. For, I don't know, depending on how long you were cautious, for years. The world reopened. How great is that? I'm so happy to see traffic again. One Vanderbilt to me was a inflection point, a tipping point for where was New York going? New York was hurting. New York's been hurting before. It's a resilient, zip code. That's what I love so much about it, and a few other things like the Yankees and the Knicks.
And the pizza.
And the pizza. That's right, and the pizza. But to me, it was an inflection point in a pandemic. It was an inflection point where, it actually opened the second year of the pandemic. The building's filled to capacity. The most expensive per square foot real estate. Doesn't make sense. Why is that? That building was the most hopeful project going on in Manhattan, opened during a pandemic. To me, was an inflection point for the next direction for New York City, and that's what they said about it. And New York City is coming back like we always do.
Yeah.
What an honor to have been associated with that project.
As you look out in the world today, are there some issues or trends that you are interested in bringing your special skills and making an impact on that would perhaps be part of your legacy?
Yeah, it's, I always say Google me. You'll read a lot of great stuff. I don't know anyone who's going to do that again besides my mom. But it's I, I want to be wherever tomorrow is. I am an idiot still to this day. I was an idiot when I was a kid in the room. I'm an idiot, all these years later in the room, because I'm always before the fact. I'm always before it happens. I mean, it's not any great mystery that artificial intelligence is going to be changing the world. Nobody's going to be shocked to hear that statement. The thing about artificial intelligence is, again, just like social media, which I had social media magazines before social media was. I had a Facebook magazine, I had a LinkedIn magazine, I had a Google magazine, and a Twitter magazine. Nobody had them. Nobody thought what I thought about. I knew social media was going to change the way that we all socialized and communicated. And I flipped those magazines in under we had 14 million subscribers, just like that, 2 years. Business in 2 years, in and out, which is something that I've been doing my entire career. When I said we're being used by social media and we should be using it, I say the same thing about artificial intelligence, and that's where we're at right now. Whether you love artificial intelligence, whether you hate artificial intelligence, whether you fear artificial intelligence, whether you embrace artificial intelligence, use it. Use it to do something good, because you can. And the fact that technology is developing is not a surprise. It's not new for any of them. There's nobody alive today that won't say, yes, technology is evolving. The rate at which it's evolving, it's warp speed now. The intelligence is feeding upon itself. It's getting faster and faster and faster and faster. How do you use that? Embrace it and figure out a way to use it. And I'm fascinated with artificial intelligence and all of the uses that we don't even know about yet, and we'll know about tomorrow. Now, no one's going to say I'm an idiot for saying that, but I definitely want to play there. That's where I want to be right now.
Yeah. Well, AI really shortens the time for people that do coding and all kind of the technical process management, the stuff that people went to school for a long time to learn how to do. And now it really plays back into the hands of the smart creatives, because it's more about the question and it's more about being able to connect the dots across different technologies and different groups and different thoughts and ideas. And so people that have the creative thinking and they learn to adopt these tools are really going to be able to accelerate what they do. It's how Google built if you read how Google works, I mean, they just hired smart creatives at every position because they wanted people to be able to see around corners, to ask questions that hadn't been answered before, hadn't been asked before. And I mean, for me, having to go to a programmer now, would take me 3 or 4 or 5 days to get something done. And now we can whip it up in an hour and get something to look at. It's like juice, man. It's like steroids for creatives.
Well, yeah, as it should be. It's fun. It's exciting. Yeah. It's exhilarating. It's not to be feared. I mean, I'm a writer. I write every day. Is AI going to replace me, or is AI going to be writing my books in the future? Is AI going to be writing my articles? Because most of the writers, more writers than not, that's what they're worried about. I'm the opposite. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I can do my research in 5 minutes. Yeah. I don't need 3 people to do it and wait 3 weeks for it. I can do it in 5 minutes. It's not writing my books, but it can do research for me. Cool. I mean, everything about it. It's just, it's the wild, wild west. I wish I was around during the wild, wild west. I don't know why anybody wouldn't. That's what we're with AI. It's just like we were with social media 20 years ago. That stuff is fun. You got to embrace it, though.
Yeah, the only problem was you only lived to 35, but it was.
That's true. That's true. That's why I exercise every day. I'm all about the long game. I want to stick around for as long as I possibly can. Living is too much fun. Breathing is underrated.
Awesome. Well, Eric, we're up against the clock here. This has been amazing. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been an honor to have you on and share with us today. Last question. If you had one sentence to make an impact in somebody's life, what would that be?
Don't miss a moment. You don't get them back.
Yeah. Awesome. Beautifully said. Eric Yaverbaum has been here with Jeff Dudan, and we have been on the home front. Eric, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. Been an honor.
All right. Take care, sir.
Thank you. You too.